you very much, Ambassador, for a service over a long career. I wanted to start with recognizing you've noted that China is not an Olympian power. And that just catches my attention because the Olympics in China are just 4 months away in February. And as we discussed in my office, I'm very concerned about the fact that the International Olympic Committee has placed the Olympics in a nation that is conducting genocide against its own people. And my preference would certainly have been for the Olympic Committee to say China had failed to follow its 2015 promises on human rights and that the Olympics were to be moved. That's not going to happen. The IOC has made that very clear. However, there are things that can be done to keep China from using the Olympics to gloss over its horrific human rights activities. For example, a diplomatic boycott. Another example would be fiercely defending the right of athletes to express themselves on what's going on in China while they're in China performing. What do you think what would you recommend to essentially try not to have China be able to use the Olympics as a way to create a cheerful facade over their horrific activities against minorities in their own country?
Senator, thank you. And I use the term Olympian not to refer, as you know, to the Olympics, but just to suggest that if you think about ancient Greece, China's not all-powerful.
No, understood.
On the question of the Olympic Games, the Winter Games, to be held in Beijing, it looks like it's going to be the most unusual games ever. It looks like if you look at the rules and regulations that the Chinese authorities have worked out with the International Olympic Committee, there'll be really nobody there from around the world because the precautionary measures that people are being asked to take, and obviously given a pandemic, will make it almost impossible for spectators from Japan or the United States to be there. So I think you'll largely have a Chinese audience. I think you're right, and I enjoyed our conversation about this 3 days ago. We obviously want to make sure that the American athletes, if they're there, and other athletes are able to speak their minds, are able to have access to the media to say what they wish to say because they come from democratic countries. And I hope and trust that the International Olympic Committee will make that possible.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I think fierce advocacy will be very valuable and in coordination with other nations. The Olympic Committee members say it's all about the athletes. So we don't really want to bring up, quote, political issues like human rights. But what they've done is force the athletes to become unwilling or unwitting participants in this effort to put a very bright and happy face on China at the same time there are such tragic and horrific practices. One of the biggest factors is the treatment of the Uyghurs and essentially engaging millions in slavery, many high-tech practices, forced sterilization, forced birth control, forced labor, that is slave labor, and in Hong Kong, where they've stripped the political rights. The Congressional Executive Commission on China held a hearing in which we heard advocate after advocate say this is a moment for the United States to grant P2 status to those who are particularly vulnerable in these two situations, both in Hong Kong and, if you will, among Xinjiang province, the Uyghur community. This is status given to groups of special humanitarian concern. Individuals still have to establish their personal vulnerability within that group. It allows them to apply from inside or outside the country and that it's the right fit. Is P2 status for those who are vulnerable in Hong Kong and in Xinjiang province something that you would support?
Senator, thank you. What I'd like to do is check with the State Department because I'm unsure of the answer to your question and come back to you with an answer. Perhaps we can do that in written form, or we can meet and talk about it. I do know that President Biden has allowed Hong Kong residents to stay in the United States on a lengthier basis than they normally would because of the fear of persecution should they go back, given what's happened in Hong Kong. But I'm just not aware of what other measures the administration has taken or is planning, but I'm happy to take that question for the record.
Yeah, that status, deferred enforced departure, has been granted to those from Hong Kong who are already in the country.
Right.
It's an 18-month provision. It has not been granted to Uyghurs. We've had testimony from Uyghurs who have been here for 4 years because of their high vulnerability in return and have lost, and their families have lost any formal status in our country. They're awaiting action. I'll just close with a comment. If the chair feels there's time to respond, fine, but I'm over time, which is that I would really love to see champions in our diplomatic team push for an official determination of genocide in Myanmar because the actions against the Rohingya fully justify it, just horrific activities. The hesitation amongst some in the State Department has been to be critical because there is a fledgling democracy, except there's no longer a fledgling democracy because the military conducted a military coup and put Aung San Suu Kyi under arrest. When we fail to call out genocide in Myanmar, it undermines the legitimacy of the strength of our position on genocide elsewhere, including in Xinjiang province. So I'm encouraging consistency in calling out such horrific human practices when they occur.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.